Hey, Mark, thanks for having me. This is perfect. I love talking about creativity.
It dawned on me when I was reading the thing about diversity. When we first talked, after I had first heard the song Montecito, and I went, hold it, there's a song about where I live. Oh my goodness, it was so beautiful. And I thought, we've got to get Rich on the show. And then when we talked, you were in Amsterdam and now you're in Hawaii. And for the last, I think, year and a half, you've been traveling around and working, writing, and performing and doing music. So welcome for 30 minutes of just chatting about creativity.
Thank you.
So I'm really interested, and I think it's been interesting for the last, during COVID, it's been really challenging to be creative if you're in a collaborative sport, if you will.
Hmm.
So you have, from what I can tell, you do most of your work in a collaborative setting. What was it like during the pandemic for you to create collaboratively?
Well, it was interesting because I actually, the reason I moved up to Montecito for a time during the pandemic is I had some health issues. And when I went up, I literally couldn't do anything for like a year. So I wasn't
Oh,
I wasn't doing much of anything. And then once I started getting back into it, it's kind of getting into the Zoom thing, but I do always, there is something special about being in the room with
yeah.
someone when I'm collaborating, where there's certain things you pick up on, like tiny little micro expressions and things, and just that feeling of being together, that it's not exactly the same, which is, I think, why I've gone on this. I was like halfway, about a year and a half ago, I just started traveling, where I was in the same place for so long. I'm like, I got to get out and I got to be around people, and the proximity and being around creative people, and it really really did wonders for me, sparking
I'm
the
curious
thing.
because you're a songwriter and I write a lot, and I'm thinking about writing and songwriting
Mhm.
as similar, and then they have the word writing in them. But we hear writer's block. I'm curious, as a singer songwriter, do you have songwriter's block? Does that ever happen?
Oh, for sure. And which is another reason traveling is great, because you need to have stuff to write about.
Ah,
Um, life experience, where, and that always confused me when, there are writers I know that write every day and they're brilliant, but for me, I need to have something personal to write about. And I love the craft, but I love just the expression. And that's what fascinates me about songwriting, is when you meet with artists and a lot, half of it is a conversation of like, who are you as a person? And
mm.
what is this thing that you haven't expressed that you would love to find a way um, to get it out and put it in a musical form? Because I mean, that's the gift of music. You get to express things in a way that there's no other way quite to get, because you're trying to connect to people's feelings, and like, how do you feel this same frequency that I'm feeling? And when you really nail it, like, there's an intuitive response that, if whoever's in the room, they feel it at the same time. Like, that's it. That's the path.
I know I know exactly what that feeling is like, and I'm curious, because you play, how many instruments do you play? You just play guitar, piano?
Well, mostly guitar, but I mean, like, piano and bass and drum programming, and kind of, all the things that you do when you
Yeah,
sit behind the computer and
yeah,
program. Yeah.
yeah. So my question is, uh, that harmonic thing that happens,
Hmm.
does that happen? Do you have to have an instrument for that, or can that be a cappella? Can that be induced through a cappella?
No, a lot of times, when you get in that alpha brainwave state when you're driving in your car, and you forget, like, that you're driving, which I shouldn't say that, maybe, but like, and ideas just come to you, and it's just great to have a phone, or something to record there, that you can just start humming these ideas, because sometimes
Mm.
they literally, or in the shower too, that's a good one, where something about the effect of that slips you into that alpha brainwave state, that you just start channeling these ideas. And yeah, a lot of the stuff that I really love that I've done has come from just spontaneous, like hearing something like, oh wow, what
Hmm.
is that, what is that, and then you just quickly make a voice note and later go on to an instrument and try to find, what that was, the key and all that.
I'm curious. It makes me think of, I'm an improv comedian,
Mm.
and we, get some give, we call it, from the audience, what's in my hand or what's in this box. And we kind of go from there. That makes me think of something else. And you have to be
Mm.
creative just like that. Can you be creative just like that? Or do you find you get into this flow state, never sure when it's going to get triggered? And then once you feel it, you're like, oh, I got to keep going with this.
Well, I've been really thinking about this lately, where I'll experience, those moments of anxiety where, and then once the cortisol runs through your system, it's just kind of like you're kind of locked up. But
Mm,
like, I think in any situation, it's truly about getting into a state of complete relaxation where you're not
mm,
tensed up. And from there, like that, you just need to be in that space. I think if there's any bit of resistance, any sense of like, you don't feel safe, and it doesn't have to be real. It's just like literally cortisol flooding through your system where you're in
right.
that like tense kind of. But if you can counteract that and get to a place where you're just relaxed, it's like any moment, any interaction, anything can spark this incredible creative flow. But it's really about non-resistance. It's like, if I scan my body for like, I'm resisting, why is that, but for me, a lot of times when I get together with people to write, it's usually hang out for like 45 minutes or an hour, get to that place of complete relaxation where you're comfortable with the environment and with each other, and then you don't have to do anything, you just let it kind of come out. But it's like, for me, it's like no force at all. It's simple, like complete relaxing and then listening and see what shows up and then just go.
It sounds like you're describing a meditative state.
Very much, yeah, very much. And I've been doing transcendental meditation for about 20 years. Um, and that's been really helpful too, to kind of train my mind to let things go and just be charmed by the mantra that you get into this relaxed state, that kind of, and then in your regular waking state, it kind of carries over where you learn what it feels like to completely let go and relax. So that's been a great method for me.
In the artist journey, the author talks about being able to tap into that creative state that we have with us all the time,
All
and
the
that,
time, yeah.
right, and that artists have a way of tapping into it with a greater frequency in terms of the amount of times we can tap into that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a natural disposition, maybe, but also it's practice, because as artists, we've been doing this since we were really young. But to be fair, I think all kids have a natural capacity for this before they were taught to think. Like everyone that was in a free flowing state, and we got taught out of it, out how we got taught how to block ourselves, basically. But like, I think everyone's way weirder than they let on. And when you're a kid, you don't have those boundaries of like,
Mm,
am I allowed to say this, am I allowed to do this? You just do it. And it's getting back to what we already know of just being in that flow state and just rolling with it, because it's fun watching kids, right? When they just go for it and they have no boundaries. They're just completely in that creative flow state, and it's just really getting back to that. And as an adult, using both your logical mind and this creativity together, that you can create these incredible things.
I'm just thinking about, in our improv class, the thing that we have to do is what we get told by the teachers: don't think, right? To your
Yeah,
point, don't
yeah,
don't edit
exactly, yeah.
yourself, don't think, just trust that the things will come out. So in that, we're like, I want to shift a little bit just to the science around the voice and the harmonies and things like that. In reading some of the things you've written, you say that you can sense tension and you can hear tension
Mm.
in voice. And I'm curious, it would just was curious to me. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think everyone can. Everyone subconsciously, intuitively feels it, and because as a producer, we're listening to voices all the time, and we can tell like, oh, that doesn't, it's not quite right yet, because you can tell if someone's restricting a little bit of their voice, you can feel it, and so
Mm,
especially when they're trying to express this thing, if there's a little bit of resistance there, it's like, I don't feel like I'm getting the full frequency here. And when they do, it's so obvious. It's like, oh, okay, now you're just letting it out. And that's the thing, is, and half the thing is just creating an environment where people feel relaxed and safe, where they just can completely do, because a lot of these things are very vulnerable, what artists
yeah.
are expressing, what they're conveying, and like, you have to create a very safe environment that they're like, that they feel okay to do this. And that is the gift that an artist can bring, is like, they're paving a path of this vulnerable space that for people to enter into. And I think that's what people really connect with and really appreciate, when an artist really goes there and you're like, I felt that, I know what that is, I know that
Mm.
space. It's incredible. And I love that someone actually um actually performed that. It's amazing.
It feels like I spend my time with storytellers all the time, but they don't sing their talk. They,
Mm.
they give the
Yeah.
talk, but they're trying to get to that same sense of vulnerability. I'm curious, as a producer, how do you what have you found as a coach, because you're coaching them towards that perfect performance? What works?
I think catching them off guard,
Huh,
it's like comedy, like you surprise them, make them laugh, like disarm them, basically. That's a really effective, because a lot of it is like, once we take ourselves or what we're doing too seriously, you can't access that point of vulnerability. It's not, so like, trying to create a light-hearted atmosphere. And lately, a lot of what I've been doing, renting houses or going to places and setting up gear so it doesn't even feel like a studio, so it feels
mm,
very casual and very like in the moment. And it's always surprising, I mean, especially with modern gear, what you're able to create anywhere is amazing. So I really like to take advantage of that and put people in environments where they just feel completely relaxed. And from there, you can do some pretty amazing stuff, because people forget they're recording. They're just like, oh yeah, that's a real, I love it.
I'm I appreciate the fact that I've got an expert here that I can ask all my questions of. One of the things when you're making a film is that some people will say that the film is made in the edit room, right? We're going to
Mm.
shoot all this raw footage. We're going to have all these different takes, and then how it's put together in the edit is really you're going to really craft the story. I'm curious about the role of editing for you when you're producing a track.
Well, here's here's a little secret. It's usually the rough take of the vocal that's the one that you use. But like, because
Really?
the, oh, I mean, I'm always surprised, like consistently. It's like, before they have time to think about what they're doing and perfect it, it's
Right.
always the take. Because that moment when you're just excited and you're like, especially right when you've written a song, right after you've written it, you're excited by it and you're in that space and you just want to express it and you let it out. And then it's really hard to beat. It's rarely do I find that singers, like, some singers just have a natural ability to do that, but a lot of times, like, just love this initial performance, even if it's not perfect, it just taps into this frequency, this pure kind of frequency, where you're like, that's way more important. Because I think audiences listen with their hearts, they don't listen with their heads. So technically doesn't matter, but they can feel it, they can feel when it's honest.
And as a producer, you can feel that as well, because
Oh yeah,
you've
yeah,
done it so much.
yeah, you know the difference.
I'm curious, when was the first song you wrote? How old were you?
mm, I think Well, I mean, I'd kind of dabbled in it in like high school and
Huh?
like, but they weren't that good. It was just really like I was always fascinated. I had my first band when I was in seventh grade, and we, I was just fascinated, like, how do you do this? But I never understood songwriting. And then, but I really in college, I was like, okay, let's figure this out. And I started purposely trying to be like, okay, how do you structure this? How does this work? And wrote a couple things that started to feel like, okay, this actually feels like a thing, this actually starts to feel legit. So, and then just kept doing it.
For someone who's thinking about that they have a song inside of them, do you recommend, some people just like write, sing, or how much is taking classes and education a part of becoming better at it?
Well, I mean, you can learn the craft, but you can't learn expression necessarily. Like expression is just like, I think for me, like a really powerful tool. I don't You probably did The Artist's Way,
Mhm.
right? And that was really helpful for me, just to give myself permission to do it. And I think
Mm.
that's a lot of the case for a lot of people, is simply giving yourself permission. Because I hear from so many people. We were just at this songwriting conference here, and I was on a listening panel where you listen to people's songs and they ask for advice and that kind of thing. And it's interesting how like there is a common thing, and I know this for myself too, but like you kind of want to like you want to show it to someone but you don't, and you kind of want to like find every excuse about what you're doing. And but some of this stuff is really good, and it's like I tell them, like, you don't need to excuse yourself, you just need to just go deeper. But what you're doing, there's no correct way, except that you're like, when someone tells me something that I really am like, oh, that I know you're revealing something to me that feels very, you're a little scared to show, but it's important that you show. But you hear those little nuggets of like, okay, you're actually expressing something. And that, like, it's mostly about permission, I think. And you can learn craft in that, but like, to be vulnerable enough to, like I said, everyone's weirder than they let on, to let that weirdness out, it's pretty great.
Rich, I've enjoyed being able to ask you all these questions. Thank you so much.